My career sucks.
Sex just isn't the same.
What's my purpose?
Where did this fat come from?
My relationship is killing me.
I'll never be happy.
My debt is piling up. I'll never find love. Why can't I be like other gay guys? Hey guys, it's time to get a grip, stop whining, make a bold move, and do something amazing with your 40-plus gay life. Let's get to the show with your Tell It Like It Is host, Rick Clemons, who does his best to never act like a dick or a diva unless you act like one first.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of 40 Plus Gay Men Gay Talk. We are wrapping up January already, but that doesn't mean the fun is over. That doesn't mean anything is coming to an end. In fact, if anything, we are truly beginning a great year of podcasts coming your way. And I have to tell you that there's some special stuff in this podcast because it's kind of at the heart and soul of our LGBTQ, who we are and where we came from and what we're all about. And for most of us that are 40 plus, you can't be 40 plus and not remember the disco era. I mean, come on, let's get real, right? I'm so excited to have an author who's put together an amazing book called Disco: Music, Movies, and Mania under the, he's going to say it for me, under the mirror ball. I think I got it. There we go. His name is Frank DeCaro, and I can't wait to talk about so many things that are in this book. I've done a little bit of reading on it, but let me tell you a little bit about him. He is got so many things behind his name: New York Times Magazine, Martha Stewart Living, Entertainment Weekly, Newsweek. He just dropped me a little hint. He's going to be on somebody's show. I'll let him tell you about that when he gets back to LA. He's in New York doing a little last minute Broadway showing before he comes jetting back to the West Coast. But
watching,
Frank
not showing.
He's watching. Well, yeah, he's watching, not showing, but he's got such a cool take on the disco era, what it did for pop culture, how Latin and disco and all these things brought us to who we are. And what better time than saying, we're here, we're queer, and we're still not going anywhere, people. So Frank, thanks for being here, man. I'm so excited to have this conversation about disco and everything else.
Thanks for having me on. Yeah, it's been a fun ride since the book dropped in October. And it was a topic very near and dear to my heart. I was a little kid when disco thumped its way into my life. I was about 12 years old, and the Hughes Corporation came out with that song "Rock the Boat," which was sort of a proto-disco song, as we say, because they weren't calling it disco yet, you know. And it was this very danceable song that climbed the charts, and we were like, what is this? This is really good. And, you know, I was in a ceramic studio with a lesbian friend of mine. We didn't know in those days what our stories were, but, and we were like, this is the best. So that was when it sort of first happened for me. And then I was about 15 or 16, and I went to see the Bee Gees at Madison Square Garden. And it was right after Saturday Night Fever had set the world a-dancing. And I went to see them on September 11th, 1979. Okay. So when and I didn't realize that was the date, but when they asked me, you know, when we were talking about doing the first book event, I said, well, look, I'm not going to be in New York in October, but I am coming in September. I said, can we do sort of a preview and just, you know, tell our people to come? And so we did an event at the Rizzoli store. Rizzoli is the publisher of the book. And I'm sitting there getting ready to interview two people, Nicky Ciano, who was the DJ the night Bianca Jagger rode the White Horse into Studio 54. He was one of the original studio DJs. Wow. And Corey Day, who was the lead singer of Dr. Buzzard's original Savannah band, which was that song Cherchez la Femme. And I'm about to introduce them and interview them. And I look at the book, and there on the third or fourth page is my ticket stub and from the Bee Gees concert. And I looked and I realized that reading, that first event for the book, was 45 years to the hour of that concert. So, and about 8 blocks away. So I was 8 blocks and 45 years away from that night with the Bee Gees, and that was pretty wild. So that was a little
That's
woo.
very
I was
wild.
like, oh, I think I'm on the right path with this. If I'm having this sort of cosmic anniversary with the 45th, uh, anniversary
Yeah.
to the hour. That was the
To
thing.
the
It was
hour.
to
That's
the
crazy.
hour.
Oh
So
my gosh.
that blew my mind, and the people really loved it, and Nikki and Corey were brilliant. So, and I've had a lot of times like that since the book came out.
That's exciting because it is an affirmation of, okay, this was meant to be. I remember years ago, 2014, or I guess 2015 is when I released my first book. And I happened to be in Book Soup in LA,
Love Book Soup.
and I did a book signing, and I left some books for, like, hey, let's see if I can do any. And a few weeks later, I called him and said, hey, I'm just wondering, do you have any copies left? And they go, oh, we have a few. And they're like, we can't really extend the consignment because, it's a small place. So they bring these writers in and move them out and then bring them in. Right. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to be in LA. I'll come pick up the few this coming week. And I remember walking in and the place was really busy. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll just kind of wait. And I remember somebody in the background talking to an employee going, I'm looking for a new book that's been released. It's called Frankly, My Dear, I'm Gay. And that was like that moment. I'm like, okay, whoa, this is that moment. Like, you're so glad. I'm like, somebody's actually asking for my book,
and you're there to hear it.
And I'm there to hear it. I'm like, okay, there's the kismet right there. It's like, this was like divine intervention. And, it never went big number one or anything, but I'm like, I don't care. It's impacted people. And I feel like this is what your book is doing. I hope it gets amazing stuff, but it's impacted you. I can tell by the way you're talking about it. So why do you think the disco era was such a big piece of who we are now as an LGBTQ culture?
I don't think we necessarily realized what a watershed moment it was, except looking back. And I mean, we were just having fun and going out. And I mean, I was too young, so I was going to the teen disco, but teen disco was better than no disco. So Sunday afternoons with your father dropping you off was better than staying home. So that was a really fun thing. But for a lot of gay men and people of color and strong women, it was a watershed moment on all three fronts. It was the sexual revolution. It was only a few years after Stonewall that it started. Not even a few years. It was months, actually, from the first loft party. Was months after Stonewall. And it was also the equal rights movement coming on strong. So you have these quote unquote minorities, the queer community, people of color, and women, even though I'm loath to think that they really are minorities on some days. But
okay, well, we won't tell anybody you actually said that, but no, I get it.
They're all coming on strong, and this was the music that they were dancing to. And people say, well, what makes disco disco? And I said, well, strictly speaking, it's that four on the floor, thump, 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 thump beat. Yep. But really, what makes it disco to me is that thematically, it's about diversity and inclusion and forward movement. And we're all going to party and we're all going to do it together. And there's room on the dance floor for everyone. I was saying that it was almost like a Kamala Harris campaign speech set to a thump thump beat. It really was this hopeful music of "Ain't No Stopping Us Now," as McFadden and Whitehead sang, or "You Make Me Feel Mighty Real," as Sylvester sang. "I Will Survive," as Gloria sang. And it was, I'm going to triumph, and we're all going together, and we're going to have a party, and it's not going to stop, and we're not going back, as someone who didn't win the election famously said. And it also, conversely, I was going to say, and look, not to be a downer, one of the other things that struck me and what made me want to do the book even more was that the whole disco sucks movement had such a similarity to the toxic masculinity on display in the MAGA movement, of today. It was presented a disco demolition night in a very militaristic, fascistic way. And for people who don't know, it was a doubleheader baseball game, and they blew up disco records between uh, the two games. And the guys in attendance went so crazy that they tore up the field and they had to forfeit the second game because the
Mm.
crowd went nuts. And, as someone in the Bee Gees documentary said, it's a racist, homophobic book burning, is what it was. And
Yep.
it was. I mean,
Yep.
and people, they weren't all disco records, they were just records by Black artists. So it was this really sort of racist, awful display of toxic masculinity. And that made me want to write the book even more because as queer people, now we're allowed to tell the story ourselves, and hopefully people will listen. Because honestly, back in the day, I mean, I don't know the orientation of the chief chroniclers of disco, but it was a very small number of people who gave it the respect it deserved in America. And the majority of the rock writers were straight white men. So they were thrilled with disco's demise and hastened it as much as they could and felt vindicated by Disco Demolition Night and never told us that house music was coming on strong. And only a few years later, that disco was the bedrock of new wave music and electronic dance music. And all that electro pop and new wave, when you read the European press, they were, bands like Duran Duran were saying, "Oh yeah, we just wanted to make disco for depressed people," and but they acknowledge disco's impact, and
Yep.
so it always bugged me that we didn't hear about that in the States, and of course we didn't. It was straight white guys who were
Exactly.
vindicated. They controlled the news that got out about rock music, and you know,
Well, but it's such
um,
an interesting thing. As I was preparing to have this conversation with you, I started thinking, I was reading through the bios and everything and looking through some of the book and everything. And I'm like, this is such an anthem for where we are right now in so many ways. In so many ways. And again, not to be a downer, but I think the more we start to lean back into history always repeats itself. So here we go. Let's buckle up, buttercups, and get ready. And I had this weird moment last week. We were traveling, and I don't know. I was on the plane and just kind of looking for movies and stuff. And I just kind of like, oh, forget it. I don't want to watch a movie. Let's just listen to some music. Right. And I found a disco channel. And of course, then I'm like, oh, I think I'm getting ready to interview this guy. Right. And Donna Summer's MacArthur Park was one of those songs. I'm like, oh, I haven't heard this in years. Right. So my weird moment was the first line, MacArthur, or one of the first line, MacArthur Park is melting in the dark. And I'm like, it's kind of interesting because that's so relatable right now. Like this essence of who we are is trying to melt a little bit in the park, but I know we won't let it happen. We won't. We will stand. We'll take our stance.
no.
Yeah, and that's what I love about when music influences in this way. It gives you that moment, and then it's not just the moment, but it's not only the music. It's then what happens, as you so well recorded here. Then the fashion, the culture, what starts to happen because of these things. It's just such a fascinating. They think they're going to shut this stuff down. There's a whole lot of stuff that has to get shut down if they're going to, quote, eradicate this from society. So what is something that you feel like is really uniquely, not so much uniquely, but that somebody could start to pick up by just reflecting through the book and the things that you've captured and everything to help fuel the stand your ground, let's get going, let's get ready to go? What's something you see from the past of the disco era that can help us right now in this moment?
Well, I think what I was saying before about looking at the lyrics, I mean, if this is an "I will survive" moment, I don't know
Yep.
what is. And when you're with people that make you feel good, they're making you feel mighty real, baby, as
Mm-hmm.
Sylvester would say. And I always go to "Ain't No Stopping Us Now" by McFadden and Whitehead because you're like, no, we're going to keep going. And it's interesting to me that for the queer community, disco was first the music you danced to in clubs and was primarily that. But then people said, well, during the AIDS crisis, people stopped going out. And it was like, yeah, so you listen to disco music while you were stealing your nerve to go visit your friend who was 30 and looked like Yoda and or 900
Right.
years old because he was dying.
Yep.
And so you use disco to sort of heal you um, in the 80s and 90s. And I think that this was again true when disco first started to have its resurgence recently during the COVID epidemic. People were locked down,
Yep.
and Sophie Ellis Bextor is doing kitchen disco, and health companies or insurance companies were doing I Will Survive, sort of a dirgy version of I Will Survive.
Yep.
And Sam Smith sang I Feel Love as the Target Christmas song. And, kind of disco had a big resurgence at a time when we couldn't really go out. So,
Mhm.
and if people are surprised by that, they certainly didn't live through the AIDS crisis. Because if you lived through the AIDS crisis, it was your national anthem. It was
Yep.
your disco was your how you got yourself together
Mhm.
and buoyed your spirits and managed to keep going when you needed to. And there was we'll cry later. We've got a protest now.
Mhm.
I've got a sick friend to visit, and I've got an action to go to, and people did. I think we are in that same space now where we've got to persist and keep going, and we might as well do it with some great music behind us. And it is disco. I mean, I tell people, I said it is in the very DNA of all the dance pop we listen to now. I mean, you
Yes.
do not get Dua Lipa without Donna Summer. You don't get Lizzo without Chic. You don't get Miley singing Flowers without uh, you know Gloria Gaynor singing I Will Survive. Miley Cyrus's song is very much the message of, you know what, I've got this. You're not taking me down with you, and it's very dancey.
Mm.
Um, so many songs on the radio could you know where someone dropped in from the 70s, they would just think it's new disco they hadn't heard before. Um, and it's great, but it's there when I always say disco is there when you need it, and
Yes.
it's that's kind of wonderful. And also, like, personally, for a lot of us, we came together on the dance floors when we were coming out. I was in Chicago going to the bistro, which I
Mm.
talk about in the book, and not in a first person way, but um, there was a guy who basically said it was the Studio 54 of Chicago. We didn't know that. We just went because it was the cool gay bar to go to. And
Right.
but I bonded with a group of 6 or 7 guys, and we're still all friends. And we're lucky because we were just young enough to not be dead,
Mm.
and so we count our blessings. But we stay in touch. One's in Berlin, several are in Los Angeles with me. One lives in Paris, one lives here in Brooklyn. So we're very lucky. And Nicky Siano, I mentioned before, the Studio 54 DJ, he said, I really think if my male friends had survived, we'd still be friends today. Because he
Mm.
said the bonds were so strong. And he said, and I'm still friends with all the women I knew back then.
Mm.
And it's true. I mean, it was such a formative moment for so many of us.
Absolutely.
But it's like the thing people are, say, why did so many people resented? Why did disco sucks happen? Well, for the first time on the pop charts, it really wasn't about straight white male rockers. It
Yep.
was about black women and gay
Hmm.
men and Sylvester, who was a person of color, maybe a woman, and gay. So
Yep.
it was, he. I always say he ticked all 3 boxes in the right outfit. So those were the folks who were making it happen, and then straight acts like Rod Stewart and the Rolling Stones and Kiss got in trouble because they had to make club records, even
Yep.
if they refused to call them disco. If they wanted to seem viable at all, they had to make something you could play on the dance floor.
Yep.
And they took heat for it. The only one
Hmm.
who kind of got it together was and managed to make the coolest stuff ever was Debbie Harry and Blondie. I mean, Blondie's Heart of Glass was, for years when they were working on it, they called it the disco song.
Yep.
And and so when it came out as Heart of Glass, it went to the, I believe, to the tippy top of the charts, but certainly high up there. If not number one, it was certainly up there. And you know, I love
It
that
had such
her
an
logic.
impact. It just had such an impact in all of our lives, you
Yeah, and
know?
it was big. It was the way hip hop is now. I was just going to say, Debbie Harry's. Is there anything more punk than a punk band doing a disco song?
Right.
And it's which I thought was kind of good. But yeah, I want young people, particularly because if you live through it, you remember this. But for young people, disco was as influential as hip hop is. It was where the celebrities came from. It was defined the fashion. It fueled the movies we were going to see. It, you know, it was on
Yep.
soundtracks all over the place. Um, and it had its, you know, there were TV shows. This book that I wrote, Disco, Music, Movies, and Mania Under the Mirror Ball, is the first book to look at its impact on television.
Mm.
And I mean, there were episodes of Charlie's Angels that were disco, Policewoman, What's Happening, The
Yep.
Jeffersons, Buddy Ebsen, who was supposed to be the original Tin Man in the 1939 Wizard of Oz, has a disco episode of his show Barnaby Jones, and he does the hustle at the end of the episode. And he was it seemed like he was old in 1939, and here it was
Right.
40 years later, and he's doing the hustle. Um, but I did a deep dive into those, and it's really fun. And um, you always hear about something new. Recently, apparently, there's an episode of Family that I've never seen that is the disco episode, and uh, Christy McNichol goes bad because she falls for a disco loving friend, under the spell, and I don't know if they get fake IDs. They do something very, very bad, like sneak into a disco, and you know. But it's so funny that it had the influence that it did.
Well, it does,
Unfortunately,
and it,
yeah.
it's such
I
an
was just saying
interesting
one good
thing.
movie. Go no, go ahead. I'll talk more later.
No, well, wait, but along those lines, it's so interesting because the influence that just Studio 54 had, and then all of a sudden now these younger people are like, oh yeah, you got to be seen here, you got to be. I'm like, that's such old news. We already perfected where you get seen clear back in the disco era, because that's what, in my mind, that's what really started so much of this. Like, you have to be seen. I realized before us there were the clubs, and South Beach and Fontainebleau and all these things back in the 30s and 40s. Great. But it just almost, like, to me, feels like Studio 54 was like the epitome of everybody's fantasy to get to be there one night, to just
Definitely.
get in. And now it's like, oh, to be seen, it's the social media influence. But you can go to LA or anywhere, and it's like, oh yeah, the whole getting into this club or whatever and all this. In my mind, it all started with Studio 54. That was just my
I mean,
perspective.
Studio. I don't know if it started with Studio, but it certainly was perfected
Oh
at
yeah.
Studio. He'd set Steve Rubell, who was the owner and picked at the door who was coming in, said you couldn't have too much of any one thing. You had
Yep.
to have just enough women, just enough gays, just enough hot straight guys, just enough celebrities, and that was the mix that he was going for. And the story I loved was some guy said, he's like, "What are you going to do? Punch me in the face?" And the guy punched him in the face, and he got up, and he was little, and he
Yeah.
got up and he said, "Hit me again, but you're still not getting in." And the guy hit him again, and that was the end of it. He said, "Didn't he never got in?" He said, "I don't care how many
Wow.
times you're not getting in."
Mhm.
And it's kind of an interesting thing to me that was it. You mentioned social media. It's interesting because although there are lots of photos, they were done by paparazzi who were allowed to be there or chosen
Right.
to be there. And they were not generally taking pictures that were unflattering. They were not trying to catch people misbehaving,
Right.
you know. So there that contributed to the sense of freedom of Studio 54. You weren't going to get caught misbehaving, even if you were having an argument with somebody. No one was filming you cursing someone out. If you were doing a line of cocaine, no one was filming you. So people could be their most outrageous selves at studio, which attributed to,
To so
contributed to
many
how
things.
much misbehavior went on, but
Right.
also the sense that you could get away with it because it was an adult playground without repercussions. You know,
Right.
it was, and if you were lucky enough to get in and you weren't famous, it didn't matter because it meant you were fabulous enough to be there, and that was plenty. So, yeah, that was a whole other uh, sort of grading system. You know, it was, are you
Absolutely.
fabulous? And I thought it was going into this project. Yeah, I'm writing the book, doing the research, and I'm talking to lots of people who went to studio. And you think going in that it's going to be only gay men misbehaving, and there was certainly plenty of that going on. You know, Michael Musto said you couldn't stand in the balcony of Studio 54 without someone grabbing your crotch, and he said you could be standing there just waiting to not, you know, to take a breather from dancing, and you're going to get a handy, you know, kind of thing
Uh,
going. But what amazed me was women would show up um, in trench coats and high heels and check their coats and not be wearing anything underneath. And
mm,
so, and you know, you think, oh well, straight women aren't going to do that, you know, and it's, yeah, they did. Of course they
yeah,
did. You
they
know,
did.
they were enjoying
The
the
freedom.
sexual freedom of the time,
Hmm.
and the rise of feminism. Uh, just as much as gay men were enjoying the shedding a little light on their own sexual expression, and you know, and it was, you know, I'm sure it was not a perfect world in terms of racial mix, but it was, if you were fabulous, that, you know, that was not held.
Hmm.
All of the things that were held against you outside of Studio 54 or outside of any disco. There was a club in Cleveland, and the I don't know if it was a Halloween or a New Year's party, but it basically warned people, you will be seeing things you've never seen before. And you will not make those people feel uncomfortable, or you will be told to leave. You know,
Wow.
and so that was even in Cleveland, the ethos
Hmm.
was, this is a live and let live safe space. And whatever people are doing, if they're snorting lines off a pool table, or they're naked, or they're having sex, it's like, you know, two men, you've got to just roll with it
Yep.
and be cool. So
But it's always such a freeing era. I mean, I was in high school. So that's when I was high school because I graduated in 81. So right in
yeah,
started
we're
high
almost the
school
same
kind of,
age. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So it was like that. Now I was in the closet. I mean, I knew kind of what I was, but I was hiding it a lot. You know, fantasizing about everybody under the sun, every, you know, the Bee Gees and you name it, you know,
Those
all of
satin
those
jackets and hairy chests and
hairy chest. Oh
yeah.
yeah, give me a hairy chest any day. Wonder where that came from. So, but it's such an interesting space to kind of be in it because I was in a repressed sort of evangelical world at that point in time, and yet I went to a private high school full of a lot of other horny evangelical men. And now, to what the funny piece is to see now, at least two of them that I know that we've ran into each other in later life and going, oh my gosh, you're gay. Oh my gosh. I'm like, really? But now that I roll back and think about the music and everything, and you could hear when, you know, we weren't allowed to listen to disco, right? But when we would find the way to listen to it, you could see there were some guys that were like, and I'm like, oh, this all makes sense. Yes, I used to watch your little cutie patootie booty like shake to the beat just right. And
Yeah,
I'm
if you
like, it
could
makes a
isolate your hips, you that gave
yeah,
you
yeah,
away. You know,
exactly.
there
But
was
you know, as you were
that's the,
speaking earlier, one of the things that I hadn't, I don't know that I've ever, I don't know, I really don't think I've ever had this thought before. Um, so my uncle passed away. My dad's oldest brother passed away from HIV and AIDS, right as the whole thing was happening. And I flew from Oklahoma to California because they said he's really sick. We don't know what it is. You know, this was in the days. We don't know what it is, but that's when it was starting to be called the gay plague, right? So I flew to go see him. And this was, you know, not, you know, nobody knew my quote secret, so to speak. My parents did, but they shut it down. As soon as you started talking about this, I was like, oh my gosh, I remember flying into San Francisco, getting in a cab, because that's how I got picked up. And guess what? What's the song that was playing?
what
Last
year was it?
Dance.
Last Dance. Oh, that's very poetic. And
I have
did
not
you
thought
ever
of
last
that.
year?
That
Yeah.
memory came forward in this podcast.
Did he?
I
Did
remember going
he?
from the airport to the hospital and seeing him. And I'm not going to talk about what happened because I've talked about that numerous times on other podcasts. But until you started really talking about all these things, I'm like, wait, I think I remember Donna Summer Last Dance playing in the cab from the airport to the hospital.
I'm
Crazy.
sure that music made him very happy back in the
Oh, I'm
day.
sure. Yeah. I mean, he was so far gone. I got one little actual glimpse of him being cognizant when I got there. And that's the whole story with the conversation he and I had. That was it. That's the only conversation I had. And then I flew home, and 2 days later, 3 days later, I think he passed away. But Donna Summer has always held a special space in my heart. And then until today, I'm like, oh yeah, that's probably the impetus of this whole thing.
I was going to say that'll definitely
I was
make the
trying to
picture
think. So
fall
there
in
was the
place.
Bee Gees. There was like, I don't think he was a singer. Leif Garrett, was he a singer or was he just an actor?
He had I Was Made for Dancing.
Yeah, yeah,
Everybody did
yeah,
a disco song.
yeah.
You know, it was
Come on. The sisters.
Sister
We Are
Sledge.
Family. Sister
Yeah,
Sledge. We Are
Sister Sledge.
Family.
We just saw
Oh,
them.
did
We
you?
saw them in Palm Springs, and they were fantastic.
Awesome. Awesome.
Recent, like at Palm Springs Pride in early when was it? Early
November, probably.
November.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it was
That's
early
awesome.
November, and they were great. And I met Debbie Sledge, and her son was working with her, and he was like, "Oh yeah, come back, it's fine." And so we went and met her after, and we got pictures. And
Hmm.
yeah,
So,
he's
what's the most thing that you feel like the whole disco era? And I know we kind of touched on it a little bit, but what was one of the most defining pieces it did for you in your life, Frank?
well, it
Other than a lot of pure joy and happiness and
it
celebration.
bonded me. I had a very close friend who is we're out of touch now, unfortunately. Um, we had a couple of very close friends actually, but my openness about being gay was problematic for them, and so
Mm.
they kind of uh, ran screaming. And were not pleased that I talked about my life, even though I didn't identify them by name. They saw themselves and didn't like, I guess, that I was telling their story. Um, the guy that I went to the Bee Gees concert with in 1979 wrote to me and said, "Your suspicions about me were correct, but I'm married and I have, beautiful children. And I've chosen to turn away from that." And it's like, okay, well, I hope you're happy.
Okay.
And I genuinely mean it. I wasn't, I hope you're happy. I mean, I'm really hope
Right.
he's happy.
There's an intonation that you can pick
Yeah,
up
no,
on whether you really.
I didn't mean it in a bad way at all. I really was. I hope one can be happy denying that for themselves. But who knows?
Mhm.
Maybe they have a good agreement. It's all above board, and he goes and plays, and God bless. Whatever
Right.
works for you, good for you. But I hope he's not unhappy. But I wish I could have thanked them both by name in this book, um, because I was thinking about the good times that we had with that. But they don't want to, they
Yes.
don't want to be
And
guilt by
then when you do
association.
like kind of thank somebody by name, then they write nasty comments on your
Yeah,
book.
no, it
So
happens. But I recently sent a condolence note and got hate mail for it. So it things happen. It's just
yep. And you
I
just got
never
to roll with it.
you don't think you're ever going to send a condolence note and get hate mail in return, but it is what it is. But
Yep.
oh, family. Anyway, but
Yeah.
what was interesting to me and on the personal level. So I'm like loving disco, and I've got my Jordache jeans, and I've got my Kiana shirts, and photo print, of course,
Of
some goofy
course.
thing, and my fry boots, and so anyway, and who do I fall in love with but a kid who is a punk rocker, and so he and I were senior year boyfriends in high school,
Wow.
and it's so oh my god, he turned me from Donna Summer to the Ramones, but it was fun, and then even though it was a harder sell, he likes, I made him like disco too, even though I don't think he could admit it until he was long past, he was an adult much
Yeah, but
later.
the disco era actually shuffled in the whole even more gender bending era that became Prince and all these other people. It's
Yeah.
like, without the disco era, I wonder what would have, where we would have gone. You already alluded to it. Like even Kiss in their own way, it's like, okay, hard rockers, yeah, but like the makeup and everything, it's like, let's get real about this. This was all dress up and play.
Oh yeah, no, that's drag. Yeah, Kiss is
Yeah,
drag
that's
for
drag in its
sure.
best form, and it's
But
such an
and I
interesting
love them.
thing. Oh yeah, yeah.
But see, that's the thing. The goal of this disco book, and there's a great disco documentary that was on PBS, this three-parter. I think what we're all really trying to do is not force people to like disco, but just sort of let disco have its spot on the continuum of American music.
Mm-hmm.
That it wasn't this awful aberration. It wasn't laughable. It wasn't a joke. It was music that really laid the bedrock for hip hop and electronic dance music, EDM as they
Mm-hmm.
call it, and it deserves its rightful place there. And you don't have to love it, but to deny it its birth in that in that long timeline is unfair, and it deserves so much better than that. And I think that's what I really want the book to do. And it's but it's I mean honestly the book that sounds a little heavy-handed, but it's a very festive book celebrating disco, and it also I embrace disco kitsch as well.
Mm.
I think I certainly don't think the song Disco Duck is as good as I Feel Love by Donna Summer. However, it's okay to like both.
Yes.
I always tell people the happiest night of my life, one of the happiest, or the night that felt most like the life I wanted to lead. I went to a party where they opened more Dom Perignon than the company had ever opened for an event. So we're drinking ridiculously expensive champagne, and then we were all a little bit hammered. So we went to McDonald's and we had Big Macs, and I think that should be that's the best of American life. Because you have amazing French champagne, and then you go and you have a Big Mac because it's all the same. It's all delicious, and it should. Dom Perignon should taste the same wherever you drink it.
Yep.
And McDonald's should taste the same wherever you eat it. It really is that kind of. Andy Warhol said, Jackie Kennedy's Coca-Cola isn't any better than yours, and it's true. Coca-Cola is a Coca-Cola. So, I think that's kind of the way to approach anything. It's listen to the really good disco,
Yep.
and get a kick out of the terrible stuff. And I always tell people when they say Disco Duck, I said Disco Duck. He followed it up with Disco-rilla. It was about a disco gorilla. It's like if you think Disco Duck was a handful, wait till you hear that.
Yeah, Disco-rilla, exactly.
Disco-rilla. But
that's awesome, man.
Yeah, so that's the way I kind of look at it, and I hope that people will get a kick out of.
Well, I think people are going to get a real kick out of it because you got a big appearance coming up. It sounds like when you get back here in LA, right?
Oh, I do. Well, it's going to be done remotely, but I'm going to do Kelly Clarkson.
That's so exciting.
I just want to see her holding the book. I just, because I know I'm going to fall over dead when I just hope we get through the interview at that point. Because I don't always like. I mean, I think it's important to like new performers, but I don't like many of them as much as I like the older ones.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I love Lady Gaga and I'm crazy about her, but for every one of her, there's 5 people that I'm like, oh, they're good. I love them, but they don't floor me, and the way Cher or Elton John or Tina Turner or Bette Midler do or did or continue to do. But
there's always going to be those, right? They're the ones.
Kelly, I think, is so spectacularly talented, and I did a radio show where I was a talk show host for 12 years, so I'm a journalist, in real life, and I get anxious. I get upset when people who aren't good interviewing people get to interview people in a very
so now I'm feeling uncomfortable. I don't know if I'm any good at this. So
when I look at someone like Kelly Clarkson and I think she comports herself so beautifully, it means a lot to me. I really respect her. I think she has that thing that Cher has, in that you actually think you could go to their house and have coffee.
Mhm.
And you're not going to, not, I'm not going to Cher's house for coffee. You're not going to Kelly Clarkson's for a Danish. But when you watch them, you think they would be friends with me. And that to me is key to what talk shows are all about. People are supposed to
Absolutely.
think you're friends with them. And, or
Well,
that
and
they
it
could be
isn't,
your friends.
it isn't always about like, I think through this a lot. I mean, I've been doing not near as long. Well, I don't know. I guess I've been doing this as long as you did your radio show. My first podcast started in 2014. We just shut it down this year. So 10 years. So I've been doing podcasting for 10 years. My most enjoyable interviews are when I just let the guests like share their story and interject when I feel like there's something important. But it's about letting the story come out. And there's moments, this, Frank, there's moments where you go, okay, wait, I got to capture this, right? But in the end, I want you to be able to share what you're talking about, and then let's make it flow. Because the beauty of any of these mediums, whether it's video or podcasting or whatever, is just sharing more with the world, bringing this out into the world. My hope today was that we did bring something out. Maybe a few people are listening and getting a little teary-eyed about thinking about the disco era, and never letting it die. And then some people are going to go, I never knew there was Discorilla. Well, now you do,
And I'm amazed when people say there was really was an Ethel Merman disco album. And it's like, really? Are you kidding? I've had it on every format that's ever been released. It's like, yes, there's an Ethel Merman disco album. It's terrible, awesome, but it's brilliant, and boy, talk about champagne and Big Macs. That, that's a Dom Perignon McDonald's experience, if ever there were one. Boy,
that's awesome.
But that's what's fun. I just hope some little gay kid is out there watching and realizes you can be gay and happy and get old.
Well, you can be gay and have it all. That's the thing. It's like, and especially as we enter in, I don't want to end this on a downer, but this is the moment. We're being called to a moment once again. And let's let the arts and our energy and all of this kind of be our rally cries. Like, you can do what you think you can do, but you can't get rid of us. It isn't going to happen. It isn't. No, I say
we're like Doritos. Eat all you want, we'll make more. It's it's the you can't stop us. And these gay kids, I spent the last night of Hanukkah with a family, and the one son, 2 of the 3 kids are gay, and the one son is a drag queen, and his boyfriend designs costumes and dresses very eccentrically. And I had the damnedest time talking to them, and you add their ages together, and then you have to still add another 20 years to get to my age. They're so young and delightful and curious, and
they're I think that, I feel like you and I could talk about this all night, but I feel like we were like at that stage of, I hid for a while till I was 36, but even when in my hiding, I'm like, no, I'm going to help push the equality and all this sort of stuff. What I find so interesting about the younger generation, I know I'm generalizing right now, is there is this just curiosity and whimsy and like, what does this matter? What does it matter if I'm gay or bi or whatever I might be? There's almost like, so what? And I love that we're in that space. I'm not saying everywhere, because I know you get in some of the middle states, that's not the way it is. But, for the most part, there's a much more so what? Why does this matter sort of emotion and sensuality and everything to where we are? And that's what I'm hoping by sharing these kind of stories. Like, hey, there was kind of that back in the disco era. Like, we were having our own so what moments by saying, let's let this all come to life. And then a conversation like this and where we're headed in the future is to keep those, so what? What does it matter? Just let people be who they are. That's the whole point of this. So
yeah, but I want to say to those kids, hey, Tootsie, my work and your work,
yes,
and my fallen brothers and sisters, it's like, you know what? We're the reason you can be so what about
exactly.
it. Okay?
Exactly.
So don't forget, don't
forget where you came from. Don't shoot the elders. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
We know where we are in our world.
Just send us to Palm Springs with a nice sunblock. There
you go. We just need the sunblock, especially us bald guys. Us bald guys need that sunblock really a whole lot. Well, Frank, thanks so much for sharing and being with us. I know you're got a lot going on. Again, I just hope nothing but the best for the book, and that you continue to shine that light out in the world. And Gang, we're going to have everything on the website. You can contact Frank through all those mediums. Go get the book. Go have some fun. I know it's past the holidays. Pretend it's a late Hanukkah, late Christmas.
No, it's Valentine's Day. Get it for
That's right. We were going to talk
Valentine's.
about Valentine's Day. That's right. It's right around the corner.
Perfect.
So,
Arbor Day is good.
Whatever day of the week it is,
Yes.
You woke up today. Go buy yourself a book.
Day. Yes, it's a lovely thing. It's it's what the well-dressed coffee table is wearing this
I love that. That is a great way to end what the well-dressed coffee table is wearing this season. Well, Frank, thank you so much, my friend. Again, the book is Disco Music Movies Mania Under the Mirror Ball. See, I did it. You
stuck the dismount, Rick. You stuck the dismount.
I did. I tried real hard. It was a work in progress for the last 45 minutes. So thank you, Frank. And I appreciate you. Safe travels coming back to the West Coast. And anybody who wants more of this, make sure you keep tuning in. And don't forget, guys, the 20th of, or actually, it's around the 20th of February, we're going to have another one of our gay men's chats. So please tune in, go to the website, find out how you can join us. And you're going to want to be there for that one because we're going to be talking a whole erotic side of stuff. So
this is a gay thing you're telling? Oh my!
I know. God, sorry, I meant to tell you this is all about being gay and erotic and sassy and fabulous and all that stuff, right?
You know what they say? It's only disgusting if you do it right. So
exactly. And by God, I'm trying to do it right. So
it's true.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here, and catch another episode in just another week.
That's a wrap for 40 Plus. Gay men, gay talk, where size doesn't matter. We drop our bullshit, get over our screwed up fears, make bold moves, and live life without apologies. Don't forget to join us on Facebook at 40 Plus, Gay Men, Gay Talk, where the conversations continue.